Welcome to the Serious TV Drama Podcast. I'm Scott, and joining me once again tonight, the tallest podcaster on the planet, it's Brian. Hey, Brian.
I thought you were going to say the luxurious meats to my marshmallow treats. It's Scot and Brian on the as we head down the elevator for another fine episode of this podcast.
Oh, you know how Dan used to say he felt his job was at risk on the podcast because of you? Which, hey, wow. Way to self-prophesize your doom there. Now you're doing better, coming up with better intros than I ever do.
I had to earmark luxurious meats. I'm going to hear that every day.
No, what makes the line is it's copious. Luxury meats. Copious. Anyhow, as I'm sure most of you realize at this point, we are back to peer and pry into the latest wonderfully weird and revelatory episode of Severance, the fourth episode of the season, which was titled Woe's Crossing. It's an interesting episode because I think pretty much the entire episode was shot, I think it was in a national park, Minnewaska State Park Preserve in Koshukan, New York, and I know I mispronounced at least 3 of those words, and I don't care. But I was thinking about this. We kicked off the season with a unique episode that was all innies, all within the confines of the Lumen offices, nowhere else. And then we reversed it in the second episode, all outies, and we, and then the third episode, it's kind of sort of a balanced thing, but it's still unique because we're spending some time with outies that we haven't been outside before. And for whatever, Mr. Milkshake isn't hanging out with anybody in that episode. So we get to this fourth episode. It's like, okay, we're going to shake things up one more time. And it's like, we're going to spend time with the innies, but they're going to be in the outie world. Or at least, or so they say.
Right. It could be the last of the permutations you can do with an inside-outside thing, unless you want to go so far up your own ass that it's like some sort of Escher painting.
Right. Exactly. It's like like holding a mirror up to a mirror up to a mirror.
Yes. But another permutation of innies outside while in, or we don't know, but interesting start.
Well, and also what's interesting is, whereas there were things that we were not sure of in those earlier episodes, things we suspected, whatever, but by the time we get to this episode, initially at least, we're thinking at least one of these innies isn't an innie based on how the previous episode ended. Although that's barely touched on in this episode at all. So I'm a little confused about that, but we can talk about that a little bit later, I guess. But as we come to realize, and had suspected all along, well, one of these innies isn't what she seems to be. Yes, it's proven. She's an outie. And once again, they jumped the gun on us thinking, a revelation we thought we'd get to, I don't know. I was thinking episode 6. Nope, we're going to do it in episode 4. So back to the whole concept of this episode. And, it's a field trip for the MDR gang. And I love the incredibly silly pretense of, it's like a reward, and they're gonna go out, for the next 2 days and experience the wilderness and whatever. And all I kept thinking at that point was, wait, so the 4 outie versions agreed to this for 2 days? And because there are certain things I'm not always quite sure how it works, but doesn't that mean that they are essentially agreeing to be asleep for the next 2 days? And how did they go along with that? And I was starting to think, if you think about each person and what where their head's already at, and we're not including Helena in this, whatever. Okay, I guess I could see how that they might have agreed to it. But what's funny is it's clear, I think, from from the moment the episode begins, and then as we move on, that the point of this trip was kind of to fuck with them. I mean, it's to unsettle and even downright scare. It's kind of like their version of being scared straight, I thought. It's like, okay, this might, get the mutinous refiners, to get in line if they share this experience. Because one of the things I thought was really interesting, just from the very beginning of the episode, is, there's any number of environments they could have picked to do this. And they pick one that we're immediately confronted with, it seems like icy tundra, and there's snow, and there's cliffsides, and we eventually, there's icy woods that are all, desolate and mysterious and scary or whatever. And it just started to occur to me that this seems to be a very popular trope throughout fantasy and even reality. If you go through the history of television and movies and literature and real life, quite frankly, I would say you can go back to fairy tales you can go to Bastogne in World War II, which we saw depicted in Band of Brothers. You can go to Narnia. You can go to the Pine Barrens episode in The Sopranos. You can go to any number of movies we've watched.
You can go to Hoth.
Go to Hoth, right? But environments like this, whether it's just the snow itself, or especially when you work in the woods are always mysterious. They're never, it's rarely a rollicking adventure. It's always, like I said, it's foreboding. It's like, you know that this is probably not leading to something good. Either it be a witch's house in the woods or whatever, or someone setting up, a weird campfire and marshmallows that they never get to eat. So we talked a little bit before we started recording, and we realized, unlike some of the other episodes, this wasn't an episode one could really do the picking apart character by character quite as before, because the other unique thing about this episode, I thought, other than when they split off a bit, after the campfire, which is Irv going his way, and eventually Helly/Helena and Mark going their way. And I guess they don't care that, isn't Dylan going to hear everything in the very next tent and see the silhouettes and all the other stuff? But other than that, most of this episode, everybody's together, which is also kind of a rarity on this show because they tend to split them up. So I thought that was rather unique. But the episode starts off with Irv. That's who essentially we wake up with. And that's also who we depart the episode with. So Irv kind of bookends this episode. So why don't we start off talking about, we can go through the episode anyway, but we can start off talking about Irv and then make our way into the episode. So
yeah, I think that's a great idea. Yeah. And I think the thing that really, drew me in first was at the end of last week's episode. We thought, reintegration. We're going to learn about this. We're going to see what happens when he goes back to Lumina. And it opens on Irv, and there's this like white background. And for the first probably 5 to 10 minutes, we're as disoriented as the characters are. Yeah. Which I thought was really, as they gather themselves and head up the cliffs, we're kind of getting our bearings too. And I thought that was really, really well done. And my first thought, there's that shot of Irving out on the ice, like from way off in the distance. My first thought was, man, this place looks like a cold harbor as he walks to the shore. And, it could arguably be, when they get to the cliff, the place that we see the painting depict earlier in the show, where the man's standing up on the cliff, and I don't remember if it was Mark or Irving that says, I think it's Irving says, I hope he doesn't fall or look, he could fall. I think
it's a conversation between him and Bert, and I think
you're right. It's him and Bert.
Was it Bert who said? I feel like it was Bert who says it. That is his, because one of them says, I don't know what it is about this painting. Yeah. It kind of, it bothers me, whatever. And I think it was Bert who says that he's always worried he's going to fall.
Yes.
Which was such an odd, it was just one of those, to say that about a painting is such an odd comment, but it says so much about, about Bert. I think it was
Right.
Bert. If I'm wrong about that, I apologize.
I think the characters may have flipped, but I think the essence of that scene, you're correct. But then we jump to, and I have to say the thing I love is we forget sometimes that these innies have no life experience for some stuff, and the sheer joy of Dylan, we forget he's the only one who hadn't been outside, and he gets to see like the sky with no ceiling, and the joy he gets in that, and I thought that was a nice touch.
It's funny because he makes the comment about the sky, and it made me recall the first episode of the season when Mark meets who appears who's going to be his new MDR mates, and I think it's the female character there, who one of the things she's like, what was the sky like? She asks about this. She keeps asking about the sky. Just because it stuck. It was literally the first note I wrote down when I was, tapping in my phone watching the episode. Not just that it opens on Irv, standing in the middle of the ice like that, but I love that you hear the elevator chime. You hear the little ding, and it's him. So I kept thinking, like, did the elevator open on this and we don't see it? Is just that sound synonymous with it, regardless of it being on an elevator or not? I mean, clearly especially we see in this episode, there are other devices that can be used to make an innie go outie and vice versa.
Right. I mean, my first thought when I heard the elevator ding and then saw this landscape is, and I'm sure it's not, but like, is this the exports hall that if you're taken out there, that it's like, the danger room from X-Men or, the holodeck on Star Trek, like, is it some version of that, or is it just virtual reality? But I love that they always use the elevator dings. Yes. That's always a signature of the sound design of this, and it's fantastic.
It's also interesting. It looks like that each of them appeared in a different spot at a different moment. Mm-hmm. Because, and the first one that's kind of weird, and it's really kind of foretelling how the rest of this episode is going to go, is as Irv is making his way up the cliffside to meet up with Mark, who he's seen from afar. I have no fucking idea.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's great.
Where all of a sudden, Helly's just there, like, which kind of struck me as odd at the moment, like, because he even asked, kind of where did she come from? And she's like, I'm just here. And because we already were not trusting her, and we were right about that, we're like, oh, that seems rather suspect to me. But then doesn't Dylan just pop up like on an adjoining cliff or something, and he makes his way to meet them? Anyway, so you're absolutely right. It's interesting that the episode does begin in such a disorienting fashion, and by going to such an extreme, it's almost like, I wouldn't say we're forced to forget, but it does cause us to kind of at least put aside our wondering what the story is with Mark, which is where we thought we were going to be picking up at this episode, because I think it's pretty clear through the first more than half of this episode is like, oh, but wait a minute, what happened with the reintegration of Mark? Because I don't think he's reintegrated. There's just what he says and how he says it to Helly tells me this is any Mark. There's no outie Mark going on here.
Right.
Never mind what eventually happens, which should clearly not be outie Mark. But it makes me wonder, because this is clearly after. So what's the story with that? Did it not take? Is there more to the procedure that still needs to be done? Was it not because it felt like it was completed by the end of the last episode, that maybe it's a multiple stage kind of a thing. I guess obviously we'll find out in future episodes, but the main point being the big question at the end of the last episode. Yeah, we're going to touch on it for like 3 seconds in this episode, if that, and that's pretty much going to be it, because we've got more important things to deal with, kids.
Yeah. But I mean, it's kind of crazy that they give you a big reveal and you want to follow it up. And they're like, well, hang on, we're going to hit you with another big reveal in this episode. And it's the economy in which they're telling this story makes me think that these writers, man, that they've got some chops to be putting this stuff already out there, and not, some of these shows hang on to great ideas too long, and that they're just rolling through them.
Right. Absolutely. So we they are joined eventually by Milchek. Oh, did you notice, especially when we also see, when Miss Huang shows up as well, the interesting reversal of colors that they choose, because all four of our MDR folks, they're all wearing these big, thick black coats and big, furry black hats. They're all dressed in black, and the Luminazis, as you went, are dressed all in white, and they kind of, it's like, wow, they're like stormtroopers.
They're like stormtroopers on Hoth. That's why I made the Hoth reference earlier. That, like, they're wearing something to naturally blend with the backdrop, and which is a little ominous when all of them are dressed in basically looks like Russian, fur hats and dark coats that would make them stand out.
Right. Yeah, I absolutely thought that. Like, oh, they're dressed in almost camouflage like gear, and they're certainly not. So they are led to that random TV set up on yet another cliffside to watch yet another video. And although I'm trying to avoid comparing this or reminiscing about certain other TV fantasy genre, sci-fi, what the fuck is going on TV shows of the past, because everyone's been thinking that anyway. Having to watch yet another video about something certainly made me think that. But while it might not be quite in the same league as the animated video from our first episode, there's something I kind of loved about this one, because they kind of went really retro 70s, early 80s retro with everything, with the sound quality, the picture quality, the cuts that you see in the video with Mr. Milchek. Not just when they go to a close up, just within the same thing you realize, oh, they've cut something out here. And which did make me think of, all right, it made me think of Lost and Dharma and Locke finding things like, oh, there's a piece of this tape has been spliced out and missing here or whatever. But the whole story of, never mind them telling them this is, this is an outdoor retreat and team building occurrence for the unwieldy, was it Orkbo?
Yeah. Yeah. And here's crackpot theory number one.
Yep.
I think this is absolutely an homage to Lost.
Right.
And I think the fact that Orkbo is an anagram for robot is a nod to J.J. Abrams, who was the driving force originally behind Lost, whose production company is Bad Robot.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's your best theory yet, just about. Now we find out that there being this little trip of theirs, at least at the beginning of it, it sets up a quest for them. It sets up a quest for the fourth appendix of, this compendium, the Book of Kier and yada, yada, yada. I'm not going to get into all the permutations, how they refer to it. But they certainly refer to it as a fourth appendix that apparently is forbidden on the severed floor. By the way, everything about this sounds like total fucking bullshit.
Oh yeah.
But it can be found. It's waiting in Scissor Cave, the very same grotto where Kieran tamed the four tempers. Just like, okay.
I think there were major, major shots at some crazy religions, like where a sci-fi writer wrote a book and all of a sudden a bunch of people love it, or, there's people with magic underpants. That's another one of my crazy theories that I'll touch on later. But and I'm also curious, this book they're looking for, the language we hear. Have we heard someone write in that style before on this show?
Yes, I was thinking that too.
Yeah. So we get this.
I was wondering that
quest. I mean, I'm not saying definitively, but it makes me wonder.
yeah, I hated myself for thinking of you in the moment because it's like, wow, did they hire Rickon to write this? Is that really what they were going to have that little conversation with him in that one episode? Is that why he was there? Could be, you know.
Well, imagine they're like, okay, we need you to write a chapter about discipline, like to naughty employees. How do you do it? Well, hey, let me tell you the story of these two brothers.
Well, I got to say, Brian, I personally, I wouldn't trust a word out of that mountebank's mouth.
That's right.
Not even televisually. By the way,
great line.
So once again, every episode has to have a word that I feel compelled to. It's like if I either have no idea what the word means, or I have some idea from the context, like fripperies, or this one, I've heard that word before. But it's not a word you hear very often. So it's like, I think I know what it is. So I looked it up. I was like, okay, it is. Cause I think, isn't it like a charlatan or something? And it's a guy a person who deceives others, usually trying to get, to trick them out of money, charlatan.
Right.
But just the fact that Irv says that, I wouldn't trust a word out of that mountain stuff. Not even televisually.
Visually. It's the beautiful use of language in this show. That there is literally a catchphrase that comes out of every show with something like that.
Right. And I think it's, if I'm not mistaken, it's after that part with the, having watched the video and basically setting up what seems going to be the quest for the episode, although it's kind of done fairly quickly. So again, changing our expectations even as the story is proceeding. That I think is when they see off in the distance, it looks like it's Mark kind of pointing them in a certain direction. And this is going to happen several times where they see some doppelganger themselves from afar. We can't really quite see them, but you kind of sort of make out who they are, based on what they're wearing, and at one point, I think a couple times we see all four of them together. And by the way, when they show all four of them together, it's later in the episode, but I already said I don't care if we jump around a little bit. The weird thing about the four of them, if you go back and watch the episode, which I plan to do, the version of Helly, her head is cocked to the side in a very kind of disturbing way. To the extent, like, if you were to look at it, it's like, oh, there's the three of them and zombie Helly? Because she looks really weird. The way her head is kind of cocked in such a bizarre angle. So, and I'm very curious about the doppelgangers because we can never really see them that clearly. We get the vague idea who they're supposed to be. It's like, okay, from afar. It almost makes you think of the opening credit sequence, where, obviously that's Mark, but a lot of times you can't, there's not really specific facial, features done, but you kind of can, and that looks like all four of these could be out of an opening credit sequence. Like, I can tell that's supposed to be Dylan and Irv and Helly and Mark, but you can't see them that clearly enough, but they seem like these weird little digital versions. Now there's a question. Are they digital things that they're just seeing from afar that have some form of projection? Is it some sort of like some wacky, almost like a 3D printing version of them that they created and in their automatons of some kind?
Or or animatronic, like
animatronics
here,
or,
Hall.
Is it somebody simply posing as them and dressed in them and maybe wearing, some sort of faceless mask, much like the faceless version we see of Miss Cobell in the opening credits. And I keep mentioning the opening credits because another unique thing about this episode, guess what there weren't? There were no opening credits. We just see the word Severance, and then the show just keeps on going.
I thought that was a good choice after watching the episode.
Yeah.
And I was really the point thing, is another thing we've seen in Lost, Yellow Jackets that gives a creep factor. But obviously a great homage to that, and they're told by Milchek that they will get help along the way, and so they recognize that. But it is funny that Irving doesn't trust what Milchek's saying.
Well, I mean, Irving is such an interesting character in general, but in this episode specifically, isn't around here where there's a voiceover that's Irving's, and then it kind of becomes presumably Kira's voice. I think it's around this part of the episode. Do you know what I'm talking about? And it's done with a kind of it's both audio and visual, kind of done in a kind of very almost dreamlike way where you see text, over on the screen. And it was a very striking choice. It was one of those things. This didn't need to be here at all, but I love the fact that it was, because it's just such an odd little bridge to get us to like the next part of the episode. I just thought it was just kind of, and it was, look, everything on the show is an interesting choice, but that one just kind of stood out as like, oh, this is going to be a unique episode, not just because they're experiencing things that are different, both, visually and sensory in all ways, but we're going to experience things which are not common for this show, not just the sense of the environment, but we're going to do things, we're going to play with visuals. We're going to have, type going across the screen. We're going to have a person's voice become another person's voice. I just thought that was just an odd, but, unique choice that they did there.
It very much was. And, seeing all the different characters point and then them all become one as a group. I thought there were some really great choices made in this episode, and that was, I really don't have any complaints with the weirdness, because they didn't make it too weird. And the moment it got too weird was the dream sequence later that we'll talk about.
Oh, yeah.
But they plant that, Chekhov's zombie, and later we get to see it. But I think what I like, where it moves to, is for the first time we see Helena and Mark sort of doing their flirty flirt thing.
Right.
And Herb is on it like a bird dog in this episode.
Yes.
Right away.
Yeah, he essentially scolds Mark a couple times throughout the episode, both privately and then in front of everybody, with the either it's him making goo eyes or you're making love to her with your eyes. There's a lot of things people are said to do with their eyes in this episode. Whether it be, referring to a story from a long ago or happening right on screen in front of us. It's a very unique, use of language here. But yes, we also, I think here, it's like after they've gone to the cave. Cause, by the way, the actual finding the book, the fourth appendix, it happens fairly quickly. So that
it's the worst quest ever.
Yeah, it's like, oh, here's the cave, and they just go in. There's the book. It's kind of like right there. There's not even any like couldn't you even sprung some cheesy kind of like cobwebs on it or something? And look like, okay, it looks like someone put it here like 5 minutes ago. There it is. But there's a couple things that happen. I'm trying to remember the order of them, and you've seen it more recently than me. Does he start to, cause there's a few different times Irv questions Helly. And I think one of them comes here. I don't know.
Does.
I don't remember if it's is it after they find the dead thing? Is it just after that?
It's just
before that.
It's just after he makes the comment to him on the trail. Then they get to the dead thing, and then he says it again. And that's when Mark mentions, Irv, his experience on the outside, and Irv gets mad at Dylan, thinking Dylan told him. And I thought may have been the first clue that there is some reintegration with Mark.
Oh, I hadn't thought of it that way. Is it, that's where Mark says, "I know you had a bad experience"?
Yes, on the outside, but like he's trying to get him to calm down towards Helly,
right? Yeah,
and says, now I know you had a bad experience on the outside. To which Irv immediately is like, "How the hell would any Mark know that?" And gets mad at Dylan, and I thought maybe that's a nugget that Mark is partially integrated, but not fully integrated, and we see it's a process. Because why would any Mark know that?
But why would the Audi Mark know anything about Irv? I don't know if he would at this point.
Well, the flip of that, and it is interesting. The flip of that is if any Mark knows, would Audi Irving not know? And if there's some degree of integration in Irving, would there be a disconnect that maybe he didn't know Mark knew? I mean, there's some disconnect between the two characters as to why he gets mad at Dylan for saying he had a bad experience on the outside.
All right, you anticipate I was going to be disagreeing with you about some stuff. I don't know if this is one of the things you meant. I think, look, there's going to be a ton to read into a lot of things. My feeling of that's solely based on the fact when they're comparing notes in the first episode, Irv kind of is clearly upset and kind of just doesn't really want to talk about it. He walks off and then ends up being covered by Dylan. It would, to me, any Mark would just interpret like, well, he clearly didn't have a good experience because he wouldn't have just stormed off and been kind of upset at the time. So it's like, I know you had a bad experience. And that's all he says. Now, the fact that Irving immediately jumps to the conclusion that, oh, maybe Dylan spilled the beans on it. Like, he didn't say anything that you mentioned. He didn't make any reference to it. We get not like what Helena says later on, which wow. But I don't know, again, you've just watched it a little bit more recently, because I like when he first starts, he's like a detective who just can't let go. And when he starts bringing up the gardener.
Yeah.
So Gardner, so what was he wearing?
What was he wearing?
Was it a breaker? Was it luminescent? Because the whole point of her seeing a gardener at night was all because it already didn't make sense,
Right. Right. Now he's a dog with a bone, and I guess an alternate reading of him being that way when Mark says that could be that he's already hypervigilant in this episode because he's. You know what I mean? Like he's on the case. He's not going to be thrown. And he's already defensive because he thinks there's a degree of fuckery abounding.
Right. Yeah. So we do get them to the hollow. We get to the waterfall.
Oh, you mean the tallest waterfall on the planet, Scott?
Yeah. I love my note. I wrote tallest waterfall on planet ? No, it's not.
Yeah.
And I just love the fact, I love the needless lie, because for them, for their experience, it might as well, it is.
I mean, like if you were there in person, it'd probably look really cool. But if that's the first time you'd seen one of those, you would probably be amazed by it.
But by the same token, he could also be telling them it's the only waterfall on the planet.
Right.
And for what reason would they think, what reason would they have to think otherwise? I get very confused about what the knowledge level should be of an innie. Would an innie just have all the same common knowledge that the outie had? But the innie doesn't have the memories that an outie has. So how would an innie remember, what the outie learned in school, for example? How much of a clean slate are they or not?
Right. Or what if you got OTC'd while you were in the middle of driving and you were driving a standard car? Like what would happen?
Right.
But I love, as we continue the subtle use of language that, after Milchek and Miss Wong's entrance, that, he heads them towards the campground where he said, the tents are a MDR blue. I love that, that's the color of blue. It is the hue.
Yep.
And Miss Wong is going to be grilling copious amounts of luxurious meats. But
that's my favorite little detail there. That whole little spiel he goes into as they enter the campsite is how exciting it is that they have 4-ply washroom tissue.
Yeah, 4-ply washroom.
4-ply. Because I went, holy shit, 4-ply. That is some thick toilet paper, man. I want to work there.
Yes,
and he makes a big deal about them giving them torches.
Oh, well, and I think the torch is a very important thing in this episode.
Yes, right.
In addition to, obviously, I'm sure a million people have said, the idea of Prometheus, that this is the first time they've encountered fire. And so Milchek gives them fire, which is an act of trust on his part, I think, trying to build some. But the torch later, becomes, I think, particularly symbolic in Irving's hand.
Right. So I'm looking at my notes where we are in the episode here. So there's also the part where even though it may be just for a moment, that Miss Huang actually finally does something or says something which indicates that she's a kid when she says, "Pretty cool, right?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I wrote a note here, and I mentioned this too before the podcast, and I'm pledging that I will rewatch, if I can, I'll rewatch it tonight, or I'll rewatch it during the day tomorrow while I'm doing laundry or something. I feel I need to rewatch the episode, not simply because we really liked the episode. I thought I became aware of a detail that happens a number of times throughout the episode. I just skimmed over, and I was telling Brian, I skimmed over a number of recaps and reviews of this episode. I saw no one mention this. Maybe I'm losing my mind, but I just came to my first note about it in here. And my note was, why is Helly's hair black when she sees Irving? I'm telling you, unless I'm crazy, not just in one scene, a number of scenes, Helly's hair changes, and it's not based on lighting where, oh, it's dark, so the red, first of all, hair color that red doesn't suddenly look black, based on it being dark, and it's well lit. I'm telling you, her hair color changes off and on throughout the episode, or I'm just crazy. I'm going to rewatch it. I'm going to make a special note of it. I might even take screenshots of it if I'm right, and I'll share it online, and I'll bring it up in our next podcast. And if I'm wrong, I will say, I am sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. There's something wrong with my corneas, apparently. But I'm telling you, it's what I saw. But it's also when this is happening. This is when I love my note here. It's him saying to her, what did you really see during the overtime contingency? And my note here is, ooh, she is so definitely not Helly, man. Because that's where it all starts to get it starts to get a little hairy here. It gets worse later, but it starts to get a little bit, I think it's at least 3 or 4 different times he kind of confronts her in the episode.
Oh, there are. But because we go, after, the introduction at the campground, she tries to make it right with him. And that's why, you had asked off mic before we started, what was the dead animal? And it was a seal, because she comes in and offers him a snow seal to eat.
That's right.
Or makes a joke and says, like, don't eat it, or you can eat it, or something. Right. But, she crafts a snow seal. And in that moment, I have to give a lot of credit to Britt Lower. In that moment, I saw Helly. Like the playfulness, and imagine her playing Helena, playing Helly in that moment. And it, there's a sweetness, and you think almost for a second, Irving's going to drop it.
Yeah.
But he doesn't.
Yeah. And I love that, because I thought maybe he was going to back off and then something would prove his point toward the end of the episode. And that does actually happen. That part of it does, but no, he never lets it go.
But I thought the first moment that confirmed this was Helena was when she left. The way she left.
Yes, right.
I saw her like change and sort of, have the whatever attitude before she walked out. And that did not look like Helly at all.
It's interesting because there's a few choices that, when we, like many viewers, pretty much were suspecting that she was Helena this whole time. But then there would always be that one thing that kind of like, ooh, does that fit? Oh, maybe it's Helly after all, and we've been wrong. And I thought the closest we got to that in this episode, it's when Milchick is reading from the 4th appendix. He's reading the story about Kira's brother, Dieter, aka who the fuck is Dieter Egan? I love that Miss Huang is playing a theremin.
Oh, it's so great.
It's so ridiculous, because they're basically talking. The story seems innocent enough. They're talking about where they lived and grew up poor, and they ate a rabbit that they caught. And they're telling limericks to each other apparently, and then all of a sudden the story just takes this hideous, horrifying, graphic, gory turn. And I mean, we all saw it and heard it, whatever. So we don't need to go into the specifics about, pus thickening into sap and all that kind of stuff, unless you have some analogy you want to make from it. But you know what I thought was interesting about this? It wasn't the graphic or unseemly imagery of everything from the half-size bride or the eyeballs popping out of sockets and whatever. It's the fact that at a certain point for most of it, Milchick is not reading from the text.
No, he's citing from memory.
He's doing this as if it's all from memory, from memorization.
Right.
It's something that he had been learned and had been ingrained in him a long time ago. From this mysterious appendix that's not even available on this for anyone on the severed floor. So I was like, that's very interesting that, he has the book, he's showing them the pictures, but he's just telling the story.
Yeah.
And the language used in that story. Now I kept thinking, could they have gotten Rickon to write this, Gus? There's such a weird over the top manner about this. It's like, oh, is this Rickon taking his hand at basically horror? Like,
it has all of the over dramatism and panache of Rickon.
Right. I believe there's that phrase in it where like, you suffered his wantonness, now he's no one's brother, only chaos's whore.
Yes, and it's delivered with like a lot of vitriol by Milchick,
which is then immediately followed by him going, the end.
The end. Which is so wonderful. I mean, it's the tonal choices are what's great. And, I when I watched it the second time, I just sort of tried to think what is like that whole story is a parable to them that basically is saying, like, if you're not industrious, if you care too much about stuff other than what Keir cares about, like bad things will happen.
Right.
I mean, that's the parable.
So the point I was eventually getting to here when I was talking about the whole Helena situation is her reaction. Right after he tells a story, although he does mention that the next chapter, if you get to it, it's Keir and the thieving nanny, which sounds like it. If it wasn't Milchick saying it, you'd think he's making a joke. It's like, wait, yes. No, that's not really the next. But she cracks up. She's laughing at, and her finding the whole thing ridiculous. And in fact, she even goes as far as to say this is basically, it's about masturbation and being punished for it. And when she said that, I remember I stopped I was like, okay, I'm going to rewind this whole scene back and I'm going to listen to every word that he just said, because I didn't catch any, connections to masturbation. I was like, let me listen to this one more time. Like, no, I don't think there's anything said that's really I would make a direct correlation to that. But what's funny is that considering who she actually turns out to be, she's laughing at a story which is supposed to be part of her family's legacy, and the tales have built up, her empire or whatever, and the way and it's very interesting to see how he reacts to her, especially because he knows.
Well, there is a great double meaning line delivered here, where he says, we often laugh at what we don't understand.
Right.
And which I think is him calling down the three, innies, he assumes, yet calling her down in a completely separate way for laughing at her family history and I mean, basically espousing a little bit of heresy,
right?
Probably in his mind. So I thought it was a great double meaning line that he delivers to the group.
And in a way, it also kind of works as, even though in terms of the episode itself, it's fairly brief, but at least for the moment, it's a misdirect. Because when she does that, when she acts that way, and the way he responds to her, in that moment, we're thinking there's no way she could be Helena. He wouldn't, because Helena wouldn't openly laugh and mock something like that, whatever.
Right.
Or would she? And he wouldn't.
And he wouldn't scold her. Or rebellious Helly.
Yeah, right. And you can see where that part of her might have sprung from. And that's when to punish them, he he makes Miss Huang throw the marshmallows into the fire. The marshmallows with all have the little imprint of Kier.
Egan. I like this. Marshmallows are for team players, and I swear the line I thought of, I know you've seen it, Glengarry Glen Ross. I thought, no, coffee's for closers.
Well, they don't just hand them out.
Yeah.
And it's after this, after I guess Milchick and Huang leave, then we get the next, the confrontation builds once again between Irv and Helly. He starts insisting, he brings up the gardener again, just tell us about him, the night guard or whatever. And then it becomes a thing where Mark is leaping to her defense, and even Dylan's not really saying much of anything. And pretty much it's Irving versus, I think he points out, no, it's 3 against 1 now. And that's when she says to him, this is all about the fact that he can't see Bird anymore. He's just lonely. And I think that leads Irv to pretty much storm off, not without saying "fuck you all" beforehand. It was like, oh,
right,
cursing Irv, which is something Irv doesn't normally do, but we've seen him do it. When Irv is really
very
pissed,
upset.
Yeah, usually it's a Milchick, but
yes,
you motherfucker,
burn this motherfucker to the ground.
So at this point in the episode, it's one of the times we split off the group, because Irv goes walking off into the woods. They go, and Helly goes to her tent, followed shortly by Mark, and we'll talk about all those things that happen. It's, her admitting how a mean thing it was for her to say, whatever. I know we probably should be talking about Mark and Helly here and what happens here. And oh, by the way, that hair color keeps changing in that scene too. I'm telling you, go back and watch it. And it's not based on
what? I'm gonna believe you.
Unless I'm
I'm gonna be Dylan standing on top of the waterfall and go, "You were right, Scott."
So, I love my note. I wrote my note is, you've already helped so much. Ooh, sexy time now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wrote, won't Dylan hear them, see their silhouettes? What's wrong with these two? So, look, I think as far as that scene is concerned, look, it's a very nicely shot scene, and the way it's lit, they have that red light going on, which is a color not associated with the innies. We don't see the bright primary colors like reds and yellows down here. We see greens and blues. So doing that kind of is an interesting use of color here. And we've already kind of speculated that Helena was almost jealous of the fact that Helly seems to be having, probably a more genuine moment of having a personal life and a romantic life than she might have up in the outie world, whatever. So she's kind of riding this, whatever. And any Mark is not out. This is what made me go like, oh, it's clearly any Mark, because outie Mark's not doing this. Outie Mark wouldn't be speaking about his dead or not dead wife this way.
Right.
And certainly not taking up with a woman, not now. He would, maybe, a couple of weeks ago he would have, and, maybe that would have been the thieving nanny. Oh no, she was, what was that? The woman, she was, what do they call it? The helps you with the birth. Midwife.
Oh, yeah, the midwife.
Here's the thing I was wondering, but I didn't feel there was that much to wonder about here, other than the fact that there's that moment where it seems Helly is poised to tell Mark the truth. To some, at least, of what she experienced when she flipped. But in true fiction, it's almost the rule like, oh, someone's going to tell us, reveal a secret. And someone says, oh, no, you don't need to tell me. I don't care who you were on the outside. It's not important. But the thing, I kept wondering about, and I don't mean when he's having sex, when he gets the flash of Gemma and then you're like, wait, the reintegration. So, what's going on here? Because we just got a reminder about it. But I don't understand. but maybe by the deactivation of the Audi mark and he's asleep, and I'm not sure. I need an explanation for this.
Well, I think that the process takes time. I think she probably has to do work on the outside. Maybe. And then if you remember, part of the reason Petey was falling apart is he got fired and he couldn't go back down. So like if you reintegrate and your other self, you're cut off from that other self, it disrupts the integration process. So my guess is that, Ragabi's going to do some work. You're going to go down, and that's going to work with the integration. But, I wanted to say that there's a weird issue here of consent with Mark. And what a weird conversation to maybe have with Helly now that she's back.
Right.
Like to say, I cheated on you with you. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of a head tripper. And,
well, yeah, it is.
And how is she going to take that? Like,
but it reminds me, now that you've said that, in a way, it reminds me of something we've seen on a few TV shows in the past. It's like when, for example, it's like with someone on a show like, I don't know, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and someone sleeps with, I guess, maybe Buffy's character, but it's not actually Buffy. It's Dawn posing as Buffy. And, and I think that happened, or something like that, something similar. I might have gotten my characters or shows wrong, but I think it was one of those Whedon, Angel Buffy shows. And I think, and you cheated with you, but it was you, but I just didn't know it was you inside you. And in this show, it's like, I cheated with you, but it's still you, but it's the other side of you, but we treat it like it's a totally different person, even though it's not, but the person was pretending to be you. Is that going to be an issue since we haven't been committed anything anyway, other than we had that one brief kiss? You got on an elevator and I haven't seen you since, technically. Cause
I know, that's what's wild.
The last moment they saw each other.
The whiplash she'll have to undergo.
Right.
And, before we close out with Irv, I want to close the circle here.
Sure.
A lot of people are speculating, will Helly get pregnant? And I think this scene tells us she did. And I'll tell you why. I can't think of any reason to intercut Irving walking through the woods with the torch and them having sex. And it intercuts him walking and them having sex. And then he falls down. And the torch goes out, and I think they are explicitly saying this is the cycle of life, that Helly and Mark are making a baby, and Irving, his fire's going out when he falls and the torch goes out. He then has his epiphany, and what happens to him at the very end of this episode? This version of him is then basically executed, and that's the end of his any life. I think that intercut between him in the woods and them in the tent, I think is telling you right then that she's getting pregnant.
It's not a bad theory at all. I just...
Well, you're going to watch it again. Watch that scene again and tell me the way they intercut it. That's what I believe it's telling us.
I just don't want another pregnancy on the fucking show. We already had to deal with that for an entire season with his sister. I don't need another storyline involving pregnancy. I'm already like...
Let's talk about the coolest version of a what are they called? The Fords, the Tempers.
Whoa.
We see Woe.
So here's my question as we get to Woe, because it leads to Woe, because we see Woe in the dream, right?
Mm-hmm.
My question is about dreaming. My question is this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the way they've set this series up and the idea of severance from the very first episode to now is the innies exist until this field trip, Otbro, whatever. I feel I'm going to get it wrong. What is it again? Ortbo. Sorry. See, I knew I'd get it wrong. See, I can't pronounce words, got acronyms wrong, whatever. Anyway, their existence is the office.
Mm-hmm.
they're always getting, they're either getting off or getting on the elevator, and that's it. The thing I need to point out is, unless they've said otherwise, and it's possible that they have and I missed it and I don't remember it, because we've heard their experiences of, waffle parties or going to the wellness center or whatever. Has anyone at any point ever mentioned whether anyone has ever slept? Because they don't sleep.
They don't, but we've seen Irving trying to keep himself awake on the outside so he can sleep on the inside. And I think that the idea of a dream could be the way that an outie passes a message to an innie.
And that's what his outie version said about him, that I was able to get a message. And Irv we saw that in that episode about him being dozy and getting in trouble for kind of dozing off. So that would be, there is the experience of sleep. It's what we saw with Irv. So naturally he would be the one who could fall asleep and actually have a dream. Now, presumably it looks like they all slept. I just was wondering, how they slept and how they dreamed, because what would the subconscious version of them experience? If their brain has been segregated that way, is it only whatever the experiences of that any version would feed into those dreams, or would it be? Could it be from anything the outie would have experienced as well? It was just, I thought it was just a fascinating idea, and I kept thinking about it.
It's totally fascinating, and when I thought of that, of Irving dreaming, that we know he's the one that's done the most research on this place, and we've talked about it before. He has the names, he has the addresses. You have to assume Irving on the outside, he's in contact with someone on the phone, that he may have heard about the kerfuffle at the at her big coming out. He may have heard about it.
I know,
and he may have been trying to tell his innie who she was and all the things at that desk clump. I mean, if you contextualize it to the world, his innie would know all the messages are there in a way that his outie could communicate them subconsciously.
Right. That actually makes sense. I wonder if the person he's talking to on the phone is the woman who's the doctor who's
Bragabi.
Yeah, I wonder if it could be
I wonder that too, and I think it could be, or
because maybe there's something he's been doing as outie Irv, and it could be as simple as just fucking not sleeping. Because it doesn't matter which part of your brain is been snapped on, the brain itself needs to sleep. You're gonna be physically tired, and him doing that is what's made him kind of be sleepy down there. Whereas everyone else, they've woke up that morning like a day for work, and they just do what they do. Whatever. That's it. That would make a heck of a lot of sense. Also, the dream he has, which he sees but everything else about that dream. The images are solely things that he would know or have experienced being an innie. It's the office. It's the other people he's encountered there. And even the temper, that's from the drawing that he's just seen. And he's just made it into a live action version of what he saw in that drawing.
Yes, he's taken all the pieces of the inside and contextualized, because they're all sitting at the clump, right? And Bert is over one of the risers. The view of how he looks at Woe is the view, I believe, he would have of Helly, where he sits.
Right.
And, moths, moths come from a chrysalis. And we see, I don't know what the numbers mean, but we see the letters that could spell Egan on the computer screen. And I think that's his outie has told him, and that's why he's on it. Like, subconsciously, he knows that she was a plant.
And it's her face.
Yeah,
it's her eye and her face. And it's Ian. That's the message he's trying to get to him.
Yes.
Yeah, I absolutely think that's true. I absolutely think that's it. And I think the resolute nature he has for the rest of that episode, even to the very last seconds,
Right.
Supposedly of his existence. And
And woe comes for him because he has went way the hell off Kyr's path. That's why she jumps to his shoulder.
now, correct me if I'm wrong, and I might be. We spoke in a different, I don't know if it was the last podcast or one before that, where we kind of talked about the parallels between what the Four Tempers are and their connection to the four MDR people.
Right.
I'm trying to remember what the Four Tempers are right now. There was woe,
Malice, frolic.
what else? Frolic. What's the other one?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
God, it's bad because we were making it because she's Malice. Frolic, I think we were saying was Dylan.
Yes.
I feel like now I thought he was was
Mark. We thought Mark was woe
Then what's the other
because
one?
of Gemma.
God, we should know. Someone should look this up on a computer while the other person is talking. Anyway, so we have him have this dream, and again, it's what we just described, and it's clearly, I also just the fact that he wakes up in a suit and all that stuff. But the next day, it's like Irv is running. Mark wakes up, doesn't see where Helly is, and sees that she's by the waterfall, but so is Irv. And then we had the showdown between Irv and Helly. And when he says to her that what you said to me last night was cruel, Helly was never cruel. And her last attempt to try to convince him is like, I'm right here. It's one of those things, it's not a lie, but it is a lie. And you realize he's put it together. The dream has probably helped put it together for him because he said something along the lines, if you're not her, then who are you? Who would have the power to send their Audi to the severed floor? And he puts it together, based on I think the final piece that fell into place was what he saw in the dream, when he saw the name and he saw her on the screen and everything about it. And the fact that correct me if I'm wrong, where woe is in the dream, that would be where Helly would normally be sitting because it's diagonally across.
Yeah, that's what I meant. That's
saying,
his vantage.
Right.
Like that's where he would be looking at. By the way, the other one is Dread that we forgot.
Dread. We were playing Dread to him and woe to Mark. It's too bad it hadn't been the other way around. But still, does it work better the other way? Not sure. I have to think about that. So, okay. The whole big final scene between them and what it leads to. And I mean, run away with this if you want, Brian, here, because this,
it's fantastic.
It's so powerful between the performance of these two, and it makes you go, okay, we've been complimenting Brett Lauer and the wonderful job she does in this episode and and then when you really think about the previous three of, when you're playing a character who's pretending to be another character, pretending to be another, that, like what you said before about the Escher kind of stylings of it, and how you can kind of get lost in it. But let's give Turturro some love also.
Oh my God. I mean, you and I were talking about him before we got on, and the way he goes, I mean, what's beautiful is, and it was right out of a gangster film when he walks up to her. And because he says, hey kid, which is what, he would usually do in the office, hey, what's for breakfast, kids? Or, he starts in the way he would address them all. And he dials it up and he goes like to absolute menace in no time. And when he grabs her and is hollering for Milchek, and is dunking her head in the water, it is so powerful. And I mean, basically he's calling the bluff.
Yeah.
Of all of them, he's calling a bluff. And when he calls the bluff, the beautiful thing is we get, how like some reveals are ridiculous, like the bad guy at the end of a James Bond movie telling you his plan.
Right.
But I love the way they did it where she says, do it, Seth. And when she says Seth.
And he says, yes, do it, Seth.
Yes,
I loved it.
yeah,
I loved
you
when he
had said
repeated after.
so. I mean, I just saying it, I have chills. I mean, just an amazing, amazing moment. And then Milchek says, do the Glasgow block right now.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is true, but something I know from my background. There's a thing called the Glasgow Coma Scale, and it rates a person's consciousness from totally conscious to being in a coma. And that's the official rating of a patient's level of consciousness to coma. And I think that's probably was some inspiration for that.
Yeah.
But I love throughout this, he is defiant till the end. He's ordered to stand, given immediate dismissal for attempted collegial murder. It's just, another wonderful thing. And there, I thought just a nice touch because, Dylan was kind of sidelined in this episode.
Right.
Now Irving has been kind of sidelined the first few episodes, and this was a big Irving episode.
Yeah.
But I love that Dylan gets his moment where he tells him, "You were right. I'm sorry." Like that. It's kind of a sweet moment between these two. And I love when he's ordered to face Milchek, and he walks right up in his face.
Yeah.
Like and the way Turturro plays this whole closing segment. I mean, if they ought to, this will be, I believe, what they submit for him this episode for consideration for supporting actor in a show.
I could see that.
This episode was awesome.
I don't know what the rest of the season has to offer, but right now I would agree with that. Absolutely.
Of what we've seen so far. And then he's basically given the death penalty. And is reset, and we fade to black. And also as you mentioned earlier, and I think the color scheme here is completely reversed from the way the show opens.
Right.
That he's, against the white background. Here he's against, the dark wood background.
Right.
And that's the episode ends and it fades to black. And what a freaking hour 6 of television.
It was, I had mentioned to you before we started recording, I thought it was interesting and maybe mildly deliberate. There was a well-known John Turturro role from the Coen Brothers movie, Miller's Crossing, and probably one of the most famous, if not the most famous scene in that movie is when John Turturro's character is being led into the woods, or he's walking ahead of Gabriel Byrne, who has to kill him. And he's walking in front of him, and the character in that movie is essentially, beside themselves and pleading for their life and then whining and crying and whatever. And here we have, it's 40 something years later, I guess. And John Turturro is being led into the woods where he's essentially, for lack of a better way to put it, is going to be executed. He's going to cease to exist in moments, whatever. And unlike his character from Miller's Crossing, here it's the polar opposite. He is defiant and strident to the end, and very much regardless of his fate, meaning he's about to end, he's very much in control of things. I was like, oh, I'm watching it, like, oh, they're doing Miller's Crossing. That's so funny. And then we have it, and right, it bookends the episode. It opens and closes with him. It's white, it's black, the way things flip throughout this episode. Much like Helly's hair, I'm telling you. Anyway, and it was funny. There was something I thought at the end of the episode, and I was not right exactly. And I did find this online, so by accident I came across this. I think it might be on the IMDb page now on the trivia section or something. Because I thought when the episode ended, where we go black, and we see it's directed by Ben Stiller, yay Ben. And then we get this music. And I had written in my notes, I wrote elevator music with a question mark. Oh, funny, because, the elevator. But actually, the piece of music at the end, and I'm just going to read, I'll just read this because, I can't really paraphrase it. It's a a track called Wave by Brazilian music legend Antonio Carlos Jobim. I'm reading directly from IMDb now. The lyrics perfectly match Irving's character by the end of the episode. The lyrics are, "So close your eyes, for that's a lovely way to be aware of things your heart alone was meant to see. The fundamental loneliness goes whenever two can dream a dream together. You can't deny. Don't try to fight the rising sea. Don't fight the moon, the stars above. Don't fight me. The fundamental loneliness goes whenever two can dream a dream together." You just had a dream. "I saw you first. This time was 3:30. When your eyes met mine, it was eternity. By now we know." Why did IMDb have all the lyrics here? But now we know the wave is on its way. Just catch a wave. Don't be afraid of it. Goes on and on. But it's all about a dream and loneliness and being, it goes on and on and on here. And I'm like, oh, okay. But I didn't realize when I copied and pasted this thinking it was just like 3 lines from the song, and I realized it's a whole fucking song. So I apologize. That wasn't my intention.
You found Appendix 5 apparently.
Yeah, apparently. So, but I just thought it was funny because I was like, I just thought it was elevated because I thought they were just kind of doing a wink to, do we hear a ding before he gets dinged out of there? I'm not even sure. But
it would be great to close an episode with like a Muzak version of like "More Than a Feeling" by Boston or something, or just something really funny playing in the background. I want to close out with a little ditty.
Sure. Do it.
They find a seal, which is a weird animal to find in this place, but we assume this could be a harbor that goes to a bigger body of water. But if you use the double meaning of the word seal is something in the Mormon religion where two people join together so that their family can be together forever in this life and the eternity. And, if I have to think that animal means something, because not only do they find it, but Helena makes the snow seal for Irving and offers it to Irving. Now, I hope that means that Irving is going to find his love with Bert, but it could also signify the start of a new family with Helly and Mark.
Okay.
So you had an idea. Sorry, I spurred something in you.
No, I just remembered something I meant to mention before about Irv's dream, because we were focused on mentioning, woe in it. And I guess we must have mentioned that Bert shows up in it. Did you notice anything unique about Bert in his brief appearance in the dream? Go back and go check it out. Remember when Irv went to O&D and ended up talking with Felicia all that time, and one of the sweet stories she tells is about
his hair,
how he combed his hair for 2 hours before. Go check out Christopher Walken's hair in the dream. It looks far more slick and more well kept than in any time we've seen it before. It's like it's a very nice, smooth, little bouffant of hair he's got going there. And I remember going, "Oh, his hair's nicer." Oh, his last memory about Bert was when Felicia was like, "Oh, he combed his hair for 2 hours before seeing you." And here, like, "Oh, look how lovely his hair looks better than it's ever looked before here on the show." So I'm telling you, go check it out. His hair looks a little different. There's something just so kind of like, it's more nicely put together than normal, I thought.
Now imagine you're poor Christopher Walken and you get your call sheet and you have to drive out to Minnetonka for one shot. In the middle of the woods, and I did like just a production note that there was a note that somebody said, that I don't know if it's the cast or production crew, said that not only was this an Ortbo for the gang at Lumen, it just so happened to be an Ortbo for the whole crew. They all had to go shoot this at that park, so yeah, it was an Ortbo for everyone.
Right. Well, I mean, it's interesting because you have a show that so much of it is shot on the interiors of the Lumen space. By the way, I would love to try to figure out just what kind of space we're dealing with, because I always wonder about, okay, first of all, I don't believe there's like endless Carters that they've designed. I think I imagine we're repeating a lot of that same Carter. We're going around and around, and it's not like the goddamn maze at the end of The Shining or something. Although that probably wasn't a fully built maze either, quite frankly. But I'm kind of curious just how much of it has been built. Just how is it just like a few Carters? I remember Adam Scott talking about filming that opening scene in the episode 1, and he phrased it in a way which was kind of misleading, and I think he tried to correct and make sure people were clear, because he talked about how it took like 5 months to film all that. And I said, I think they filmed little bits here and there while they were doing other things. They just couldn't do it continuously. It didn't take 5 months to film him running for like Tom Cruise for a few minutes, whatever. But I'm just curious how, in fact, it makes more sense because, well, you only probably have a couple cars that they've built, and how many times you can keep showing yourself running on the same one, but also make it look different. You have to do this over the course of time, I guess. I don't know. Maybe they're just, Ben Stiller thinks he's Stanley Kubrick and they're doing like 8,000 takes of it. I have no idea.
Well, the idea of what is the physical dimension that this place could house, and how do they pull this off? Is it virtual reality? Do they have huge warehouses? Is this a world unlike any, that looks like ours, but it's not like ours? And so, this is an episode that answered a big question and gave us some little things to think about. It didn't pose the biggest questions. We're going to find out what happens to Irving.
Right.
But the question is, how long until we find out what happens to Irving?
Yeah. It resolved the Helena question that we had. And, so probably a lot of fans like, oh, we were right. We got one right. It's like, yay, it's episode 4. I don't know how much you want to any of us should be patting ourselves on the back for getting this one. It's not like when I told everybody, I'm telling you, it's going to be flash forwards. I'm telling you. And then it happened. And everyone thought I cheated. It was like, how did I cheat? What do you think? I got a script from somebody in advance? Idiots. Anyway, I couldn't resist. But the show, once again, for every answer you get 2 more questions. And there are things about this episode. Oh, okay. Now we understand. And now it answered our question. Like, apparently there is some device or something where they can just shut it off for someone. And if you can do it once, you can do it for multiple people, multiple times, and so on. It shows that there's a lot more to this technology than we had even realized before. And that there may even be a way as far as, reintegration. Like, you might not have to have the whole procedure. You might just have a button that needs to be pressed. Question. At the end, one of the last things Irv says, I think it's after, Dylan says, I should have believed you or whatever, you were right. And he tells him to hang in there. And it's like something that you write out of a motivational poster. Did they design a new motivational poster that's hanging in Lumen that's kind of a takeoff on what Dylan did?
Yes. I think there actually was, when they walk in the hall to the orientation room, I think there's a hang in there poster.
Yeah, and it's okay. So telling him hang in there is very funny.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
And would have been a quintessential Irving line in season 1.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it's another impressive episode of this series. I'd heard some people talking about, it's only the beginning of February and we already have a contender for, best TV episode of the year kind of thing. And I'm like, I think it was an exceptional episode. It might be, but we've got another 5 episodes to go with this show. And I just feel we still might get one or two that are better than this one. I think the first 4 have all been, I don't know if I can rank one over the other, because each one has a reason. You can say, I think this one's been the best. I think this one, and they keep changing the game on us. And this was a totally different experience to see the innies outside and what they went through. And now I kind of want to know. I want to see how they agreed to this. I need to, I want to know, were they sleeping for 2 days? How does that work? I'm confused. I don't know. I don't know.
I know, and you think like, are we going to see 3 more manifestations of of the tempers of Kier? Are we going to see the other 3 at some point? Are there VR rooms for all 4 of these, and things like that? And uh, what's going to happen when they wake up? If Irving goes to find them, if he reintegrates.
Right. Well, there's a lot of episodes, a lot of things about the episode that what are the repercussions going to be?
Yeah.
The Irving stuff, certainly. And what about what Helen/Helena did? Was this done with the full okay and know-how of the board and everyone else involved? I mean, it's one thing to have Milchick. Milchick's still an underling to her, because what she did, and then the fact she ends up having, let's be blunt, she ends up having sex with one of the innies, and especially that innie who is so very important to what they're doing. Oh, by the way, I just want to I'm not exactly correcting myself. I just want to make something clear. I know I know that people aren't 2 different bodies and they're just somewhere sleeping. I know it's the same person. It's just basically someone agreeing to just not exist for the next 2 days. I was using the phrase, they're just going to sleep, which is kind of like what they're experiencing when they're going to work or something.
Right, but you got to think, like, if it's 2 days, Dylan has a family.
Right. So,
like his wife and kids, what's going to happen there? And what's going to happen if Devin can't get a hold of Mark for 48 hours?
I mean, was there money offered, as a bonus to do this? Because the motivation for Lumen to put them through this, I feel it was something done to kind of like, get them in line, not to reward them. At least that's the way I took it. I had one more note. I can't remember what it was, so I'm not going to worry about it. It'll probably occur to me next time around. But yeah, another really exceptional episode of an exceptional series and something we love talking about. If that thought pops in my head before the podcast ends, I'll bring it up because I can't remember what it was. It was actually a decent point. God damn it. The next episode of Severance will be titled Trojan's Horse. As opposed to Trojan Horse, Trojan's Horse, as in a horse that belongs to Trojan. Just saying. There's an apostrophe and everything. Just saying. So me and the Bryster over here, me and Brian will be back in a week's time to cover that episode. Actually, me and Brian have to have a little conversation when we finish recording about when exactly we're recording this. Because apparently his, king of podcaster over here has other podcast news that might interfere. And if that happens, guess who's going to get his ass kicked off this podcast? No, I'm just kidding. Like, you think you can't be replaced? Everybody's replaceable. So I'll be coming in a week. Before that, we are going to be recording and releasing the first of many Twilight Zone rewatch podcasts. We were supposed to record it last week, and it would have been out already, but I had taken slightly ill this week, and it was largely felt that I would be sniffling throughout the podcast. And while, some people would be fine with that, they felt that I would be whining about it for the next 6 to 8 months. Like, I ruined my podcast going the whole time during it. So, I can't do that many lines off the microphone. So me and Brian are recording this on a Saturday evening. We hope the 2 of us plus Jamie and Joe Fortunato, if he stops bugging me about, things, we will record on Monday, and we will be talking about the Twilight Zone in general. That's mostly going to be me talking for way too long. Sorry, David. And then we will be talking about the very first 2 episodes of the Twilight Zone. The first 2 episodes, which were Where Is Everybody and One for the Angels. If you have Paramount Plus, you can watch Twilight Zone there, and you can watch those 2 episodes. You could probably find it a few other places via YouTube or whatever, but that's the place to find it normally for people is Paramount Plus, or buy them on fucking Amazon if you want. It's it'll be worth it. I don't know. I'm not going to guarantee the first podcast is going to be great because I have my concerns about it, but all the ones that'll follow it will be great. That much I'm going to guarantee.
That's a guarantee. Well, Scott's put a lot of work and thought into the Twilight Zone podcast. And if you want to follow something, that's basically built the spine for a lot of the science fiction television and some of the more creative anthology series that came down the line, you should definitely come join us and check that out. We're going to rotate hosts in and out, and it should be a good time, and maybe you'll even learn something.
That's what I look forward to whenever I put a podcast out, having a good time and maybe learning something. It's like what happened with Mark in this episode. He had a good time and hopefully he learned something. He learned that he cheated on his dead wife with someone who was a big old liar.
He cheated on his dead wife and his hopeful new girlfriend with a stranger.
Yeah. He didn't even notice how her hair color kept changing. Anyway, until all of a sudden it was his dead wife. It was like, whoa, what's going on here? Anyway, you can find this podcast wherever podcasts are found. You can also find us on Instagram and that horrible X place and other things. Just look for the Serious TV Drama. You know what? Just Google Serious TV Drama Podcast or STV Podcast and look where you might find us. Maybe you'll even find us on Apple and give us a rating and a review. Don't base it on the last few minutes of this podcast because we were doing so well until I rambled and threw us totally fucking off track. Anyway, Brian, thank you so much for joining me once again and you being the heart and spine of this podcast. So thanks a lot.
Well, Scott, I am going to head back up the elevator and I'll see you tomorrow at Lumen.